I've been around journalism for many years, and I've watched it change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the changes that I've seen in journalism, particularly as they pertain to covering incarceration. When I was just starting out at the Los Angeles Times, this was back in 1967, this was a time of great ferment in the prison system in California. There are names that I know, will recognize, like George Jackson, Eldridge Cleaver, people like that. They had a profound effect on the way the prison system operated. And I think I was 23 years old or so, and I seemed to be the only person who was interested in this topic. So I made a pitch for doing stories about it, and as a result of that, I was able to kind of establish myself as the prison guy at a time when nobody else seemed to want to do those stories. That's my first acquaintance with San Quentin. I think I went to San Quentin the first time in 1969. At that time, there were eight male prisons in California, one female prison. Now there are more than 33. There are 2 female prisons. I kind of lost count of the number of male prisons because they are trying to close down a couple. And I think that's probably going to take place sometime later this year. I got a bunch of slides here that I'm going to show you. They're kind of interesting for me. The first one you're looking at is a well-known piece of real estate. It's San Quentin Prison. Everybody's got that right? This young man here, his name is Phuan Yu, and he was a boat person from Cambodia. He was involved in a homicide out in the Central Valley, and he was sentenced to 35 years to life. And right now he was deported, and he's made a new life for himself back in Cambodia. He's one of my Facebook friends. He's not the only one. This PowerPoint was done by a young man in China. I do a lot of teaching in China. And one of the assignments that I've given, one of the classes I teach there, is about incarceration. And I asked the Chinese students to compare what they know about U.S. prisons with what they know about Chinese prisons. Now, we pride ourselves, the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we look down upon China as an authoritarian outfit, and people are presided over by authoritarian government. The United States has more people in prison than any other country in the world. Way more than China. I was quite surprised at how readily the Chinese students took to this assignment. They actually got in touch with through the miracle of email and stuff like that. They got in touch with some of the San Quentin prisoners and interviewed them sometimes via email, and sometimes actually talking to them on the phone. They produced some really interesting and insightful reports. Are there any method to set up a link with family when you were incarcerated? Do you think it is proper? And they were quite shocked that their American prisoners usually are quite, they have very restricted access to their families. This young man actually got this piece published in an academic journal in China. Kat mentioned the fact that I've been taking UC Berkeley students to San Quentin since 2012. And almost without exception, the students say that it's a life-changing experience. Their expectations are quite different for what prisoners are like. Now, I'll give a big caveat to that. San Quentin is not typical of prisons, not at all. And particularly the ones who work in the journalism program. They are very, very selective with the people that they allow to work for the newspaper. And I think without exception, we've had nothing but good experiences. One of my first students that I took to San Quentin actually wound up getting married to a gentleman who is doing a life sentence, and he's still there. And I don't think he's going to get out anytime soon, because it's crime. There are certain things that you can do and you'll never get out. Kill a law enforcement officer. He happened to be a juvenile at the time, and supposedly they are not supposed to sentence juveniles to life without parole, but he's still there. This was a photograph from 2014 when the staff of the San Quentin News got an SPJ award for their overall coverage. And we had only been working with the prisoners for 2 years, and the improvement in their copy and everything was really noticeable in the kinds of stories. And so they got this recognition from SPJ. That was a big feather in our cap. This is a class in 2017. They're sitting around a table in the media center. This gentleman I'll talk a little bit more about. This is Arnulfo Garcia, who was the editor-in-chief when I first got there. I can't say enough about him. Charismatic guy, great manager. And these are some of our students in the class. You can see it's an ecumenical group: Asian, Mexican, African American, Muslim. This is me on the grounds at the San Quentin. This is Arnulfo talking to one of our students. That's inside the media center. The media center used to be a shop area where they had machinery and stuff like that. But about, I guess it was 8 or 10 years ago, they cleared that out and they made that area the production area for the journalism stuff. All of that's going to change next year because the governor built a $270 million building, educational building, on the land that is San Quentin. It used to be a giant warehouse where they made mattresses and things. And now it's a multi-story building that's going to be devoted to education. That's a young man named Dante Jones. Dante did 17 years before his sentence got commuted. And he was released last year. He's since gotten married. He's now employed by KALW in San Francisco. He's a very gifted photographer, does audio. And he's been a guest speaker several times at the journalism school, and he stays in touch with a lot of the students that he met. I mean, but I keep wanting to emphasize that this is not typical. These kind of success stories are rare, but when they happen, they are a very big deal. There is one young man who he had a pretty rough time. His life was threatened, and they moved him to another prison to keep him safe. While he was there, he kept working on his journalism skills, and he got an article published in the New Yorker. His name is Joe Garcia, and he wrote an article for the New Yorker about how he developed his attachment to Taylor Swift while he was in prison. And then more recently, he did a follow-up of that. And he's employed with the same program that Steve Brooks is, that's funded by the state of California. I think he lives in Southern California. But he's a very talented young man. This was a slideshow that one of the students in China did after they had done their research comparing Chinese prisons with American prisons. I think you'd agree that Chinese prisons are less harsh. I visited a Chinese prison in Shanghai. This is interesting. There's a lot of ideology that the Chinese prisons teach. Not so much in America. We just want them to come and learn, the basics. And there's a big emphasis on reintegration into society. I thought their essays and their presentations were actually quite good. Okay, what are you looking at? You're looking at the place where the San Quentin News was published for many years. It's inside a warehouse, and there was a flatbed printing press in there. And in 2008, the Department of Corrections decided that they didn't think that printing was a viable career option anymore. So they said, we're going to stop teaching printing. And therefore, the San Quentin News, which had been published since the 1940s at state expense, because it was a training program, it would shut down. The main people you see in this video is a guy named, they call him Harry O. Harris. He was one of the founders of Death Row Records. He and a guy named Suge Knight, they founded Death Row Records, and they made millions of dollars. But they also killed people, and they dealt drugs. So Mr. Harris wound up getting a state charge for selling drugs and homicide, and a federal charge. So he happened to be the editor-in-chief in 2008 of San Quentin News. So when they made the announcement that they were going to close down the newspaper, he went around with a camera and started interviewing people about how they felt about closing down the newspaper. So this is that video from 2008.
So Bonnaroo, what's the name of this machine?
Hiding Bird Offset.
What is it?
Hiding Bird Offset.
And what do you have on the press right now?
Right now is the San Quentin newspaper finishing up the last issue that they got done.
Oh, okay, great. What you're saying? So you're saying that this program might be stopped. How you feel about that?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
I'm disappointed, actually, because they said that they're offering rehabilitation programs, but yet they're taking them. So it leaves us in a situation where we're just sitting around the yard looking at each other and don't have really nothing to do.
I'd just like to say that I enjoyed working here, and like I said, I had planned to.
Okay, this is Harry Harris. Harry has a distinction. He was the last person that Donald Trump pardoned before he left office in his first go-round. He pardoned Harry Harris.
Why did he pardon him?
Promises were made, gifts were exchanged. Why does he pardon anybody? Yeah. It was a collection of things. Harris was mainly it was drug charges, but there were also some allegations of homicide. Suge Knight is serving time for homicide, but he's been very generous with San Quentin. This is part of this tangled story of how San Quentin News came back after the Department of Corrections shut it down. A group of journalists from Marin County, retired mainly, they formed a little kind of informal group and decided that they were going to try to save the newspaper. So they went around and to the Marin Foundation, the usual suspects. But before they could get that organized, Harry Harris just wrote out a check every month for $5,000 to cover the printing costs of the San Quentin News. And that's how it stayed afloat until they managed to get the wherewithal together to get foundation funding. Now they've got a pretty, I would say, a pretty stable financial picture. They've got a non-profit called, what is it? I can't remember the name now, but it funds not only San Quentin News, but also the women's prison has a paper down in Chowchilla, and then there's another newspaper that's run in up in Ione in the Gold Country. It's called Mule Creek Prison. And I think there might be another one that I'm not remembering. This is something I think you might find interesting. One of the assignments that I always give my beginning journalism students at Berkeley, I ask them to write their own obituaries. And this usually gets them very upset because they've never really thought about, hey, this is all going to end. I said, everything has to be factual except the actual cause of death. You can make that be fiction, but everything else, they have a really hard time with it. I tried this with the San Quentin group. This was Chris Majeria, now works for the AP. He used to work for the LA Times. He did an amazing story. I sent him a lot of the copy that the guys had written about themselves. The one thing that was really amazing about this assignment was that the prisoners who did the assignment, they all wanted to redeem their lives. They thought up some kind of a way that they would die heroically. They didn't want to die, doing some humbug. This is our friend Fuan Yu, whom I showed you before. He got deported. This is before he was deported. This tells kind of the story of his life. And those of you who are familiar with the Central Valley know that there's a lot of gang activity, and particularly in the 70s when the Asian people came and they settled there, and there were already well-established Mexican gangs, well-established black gangs. Yep. That was kind of his statement. He hypothesized. He made up a scenario in which he was killed saving the life of a correctional officer during a riot. And this guy is still in the jug. He's doing time for a homicide. He's a very talented actor. He performed in a lot of Marin Shakespeare productions. And I don't know what happened, but he got transferred from San Quentin. I think he is at, he may be at Folsom, I'm not sure. But I haven't seen him since he left. Excuse me? A lot of times it's because of some institutional infraction. They did something that was just unacceptable, so they decide to punish them by sending them to a place that has fewer privileges. That could be it. I never got a full accounting. Sometimes it happens because they're viewed as being part of a gang or something like that. But what that does is that when he moves away like that, he gets disconnected from his family. Makes it harder for them to visit him. Oh, this was an interesting case. George Burns, who was a student, no relation to George Burns, he was a student in my class, and that next year he actually died. He actually died. And again, it's the same thing. Mr. Burns' early life was rocky. He was in and out of jail. He wrote about enrolling in college classes. In other words, he was going to redeem his life. But he didn't get a chance to. He died. This is a well-known prison journalist, Juan Moreno Haynes. He has been down for almost 30 years. And he was with the first cohort that I ever taught at San Quentin. Supposedly, his offense was burglary or bank robbery. You're not supposed to ask them what their crime was, what their offense was, because if they're involved in a sexual offense or something like that, they don't want people to know it, or anything like that has some sleazy component. So whenever somebody has been incarcerated for a really long time, you can almost always bet that there's some kind of sexual offense in their rap sheet. He's an excellent writer, very devoted to the craft. I've edited dozens of his stories. He's very careful. He comes from a Navy family. Been turned down for parole more times than I can think of, but he keeps coming back. This is a picture of our Society of Professional Journalists chapter. Most of these guys have been released. This is our friend Arnulfo, who I told you about. He was the editor when I first got there. He was a three-striker. He never killed anybody. He was a very unsuccessful burglar, and he got a third strike for some kind of residential burglary, and they gave him life. Well, finally, his sentence was commuted, and he was released, and about 2 months later, he was killed in an automobile accident. Most of these guys have been released. Most of them have been released. Juan is still there. Kevin is still there. Yeah. Okay. That's enough. I'll take your questions now.
I want to take the first question,
Okay.
and then I'll ask call-in people. So one theme through all of the slides that you showed and the stories that you told is that there seems to be a very deep desire for redemption.
Mm.
And I think that there's some truth to something you told me a couple of years ago about how almost everybody who gets out of prison who has been involved in journalism in prison has a perfect record. There's no recidivism.
Almost.
Almost. But it is quite remarkable that the practice of doing journalism and telling stories leads to both healing and a sense of purpose. And I wonder if you could say just a little bit about how often you see that and how you see it manifest, because that's very striking to me, because if you're in there for life or close to life, it must be easy to lose hope. So what is it about the journalism that makes a difference?
God, I wish I knew the answer, but I'll tell you my off the top of the head. The guys that, like these chaps here, who are all part of the SPJ chapter, it's like a gang. It's like a prison gang in a way, only without the violence and the tattoos and all that. They are very close, and they they're really hyper about making sure that the people in their group don't screw up. They're really down on them. And just about, sometime, I think it was last year, we had a completely clean record. No San Quentin news person from the media center had ever recidivized, or whatever you call it, until there was a guy named Eddie Herrera, who was the photographer, and I don't know what happened. Eddie, I would have banked that Eddie was going to go straight, and he was released. He and his girlfriend had a couple of kids. Eddie fell in with his bad companions down in San Jose, and he got into a fight with some guy and proceeded to take a machete and whack this guy a couple of times. He is now in jail, and they are going to, I think, revoke his commutation and send him back to the judge. Well, when that happened, all of his colleagues, both the ones that had been released as well as the ones who were still in jail, were furious with him. They were furious with him. Well, what can you say? What can you do? It just, that's the way it is. But the odds are, once people go into this and they get involved with people who are really devoted to the idea of staying on the straight and narrow, and insist on it, and insist on everybody around them doing that, it makes a big difference. it makes a really big difference. Again, this is just for the people that I know. Now, a lot of those guys there will go back home, and they'll go back down to Southern California, and they'll fall in with the same group. And next thing you know, they'll be back in jail. But it's hard to predict. No. There's no counterpart to that. The Folsom did have a kind of a newsletter, but I don't think they still have it. The only functioning things that we recognize as a newspaper that I know of are San Quentin, Mule Creek, and Chowchilla. Those are the only ones that I know of. One thing I can do here that would help you along, I can show you what the San Quentin News looks like, if you haven't seen it already. It's actually a pretty handsome newspaper. If you look it up online, San Quentin News, they do the whole 9 yards. They've got newspaper, they do video, they do audio. It's a very clean operation. Yeah.
Did you say it was going to be shut down a few years ago?
Yeah, it was in 2008. And they just did away with the printing press. But the way it got saved was that one guy who was the editor, he wrote checks for $5,000 for about a year every month so that they could continue to print the paper. And by that time, they had gotten their financing together. So now they're on, I think, a fairly stable financial footing. And the newspaper is published in a printing plant that's in San Rafael. But I'm not sure that, in my view, I'm not sure how long that's going to last, because it's just like every other print operation that you ever knew. It doesn't make sense to print paper.
Was because of the permeability, the sense of hope from within, that there was a corresponding,
God, I wish I knew the answer. I wish I knew the answer to that. I know that they're very, very close to their families. I think the newspaper gives them an outlet when people are, looking at what their loved ones in the prison are doing. That gives them, an outlet to know what that person is up to, as opposed to the rest of them. It's very, very hard. It's very difficult to stay in touch with their family. The people that have contraband phones are able to do it, but they run the risk of getting in a lot of trouble. It's very expensive to make legal phone calls. And a lot of people in San Quentin are from Southern California, and so they have to motor all the way up here from down there if they're going to have a visit.
Yeah, the governor has been sort of trying to transform San Quentin into much more of a rehab-oriented facility than really punitive.
Nothing as dramatic as he is portraying it. Now, there's an obvious reason for that. The model is Norway. Norway. They 2 or 3 years ago, they went up to Norway and they got religion. The problem is that Norway is a homogeneous society, and they don't have, the history of violence like we do. So they can lighten up an awful lot in terms of the interaction between the prison guards and the inmates. You can't do that here. The union that represents the prison guards is the most powerful union in Sacramento. And no, it's not going to be a dramatic change, in my opinion. Okay. By law, the prison cannot censor by law. The problem is that this was hashed out in the 1980s, when the last time they shut the prison down, shut the newspaper down. The prison said, "Yeah, you're right. We can't censor them, but we don't have to run the newspaper. If they just say no more newspaper, that's the end of it." So there's a lot of self-censorship. A lot of self-censorship. That's why what Kat Rowlands is doing with Steve Brooks is so important. They do not censor Steve Brooks, and that's why he's always getting in trouble. That's why he's always getting in trouble. No, it kind of died last year, last March, when I got my brown card taken away. It was part of, it's a complicated thing to explain. Once the governor decided he was going to run for president, the CDCR needed to exert more control over the narrative of what was going on in prison. For example, they instituted a whole bunch of new rules that restricted clearances into the prison. For the 14 years that I'd been going, that was never a problem. Now, you have to go over, if you want to get a clearance, you have to go over and be photographed and get your fingerprints taken. They have exactly 2 clerks who manage this, but they have about more than 1,000 volunteers who have to be certified that way. So it just, it's not practical anymore. Yeah. Okay.
Involved in interviewing people who want to be part of it, and how do they become part of it?
Oh, it's like everything in prison. It's a deal. It's prison people know other people. It's politics.
So they get recommended by a friend?
By people who are already on. Yeah. And it's a privilege because, you get to work in an office that's decent, and you get to, I bring students in, they get to interact with people who are in the free world, so that's a big perk.
Right? And they're looking for friends that will be supportive and
Yeah. Now, if you go for your parole hearing, you have people that know you and then will write letters. So that increases your chances of getting parole.
Now for building these prisons and stuff, right? And I'm wondering how that affects these in-house programs.
I'm not sure. I don't really know a lot about the private prison thing. This was a big controversy not long ago. California does not really do that much. We don't have a whole lot of prisoners that are going into private prisons. In fact, they're trying, like I said, they're trying to cut down, the number of people who are incarcerated that we're paying for. I think we're done.
Bill, I wondered if I could play a little clip from this one particular audio piece that we published, because it illustrates your point about how very random it can be when people get in trouble and when the institution looks the other way. So this particular piece was done with one of our reporters on the outside talking to Steve Brooks on the inside about what it was like to pass through holiday season when you were away from your family. And after this was published, the prison got very upset and accused Steve Brooks wrongly of having used an illegal recording device. but it was actually our reporter on the outside who recorded the interview. But I'll just play a little snippet of it because it's quite compelling, and it also makes you wonder, like, is it because they were embarrassed about the conditions or the lack of humanity? But it's worth just taking note.
I'm Ruth Dussault. This week, we visit a place 6 miles north of Sausalito, California, for a special report, the holidays in San Quentin.
This is Steve Brooks. I'm incarcerated at San Quentin Rehabilitation Center, formerly known as San Quentin State Prison. I'm walking around the facility, talking to incarcerated people about what it's like to celebrate Christmas in prison.
My name is Jesse Milo, and I've been incarcerated for 23 years.
Do you celebrate Christmas?
That's a crazy question. It's hard to celebrate anything in prison.
My name is Hanok Rufael. I've been incarcerated for 17 years. Christmas I remember the most, I would say, would be the Christmas I found out Santa wasn't real. I saw my parents bringing in the bike that I wanted, and I was like, man, I knew we didn't have no chimney, and I knew this thing was, I knew it was a stretch, but, yeah.
How long have you been playing the violin?
I've been playing the violin now. I'm coming up on 9 years. In this place, I can fill it with Christmas carols. There's something I can do for the community in here who are often forgotten, and those are the things we don't get to hear.
San Quentin is California's oldest maximum security prison. It was built in 1854. It's known for its infamous death row and a former execution chamber and dungeon. The structure looks like a steel castle at the edge of the bay. The housing units are 5 stories tall with wall-to-wall cells. The cells have iron barred doors that are covered with a steel mesh screen. It's usually a gray place. But the day after Thanksgiving, boxes of Christmas decorations are brought out from storage, and small Christmas trees, stockings, and lights are hung around the facility.
Christmas, I gave you my heart. The very next day, you told that last Christmas or this Christmas?
Yeah, so during the Christmas holiday season, incarcerated people here at San Quentin are allowed to go out to the yard at night. And normally they can look around at the surrounding hills and see homes with Christmas lights and Christmas ornaments up. And they're able to view the decorations of homes surrounding the prison.
So that's just a snippet, but you get the idea that there's a lot of sentiment and feeling and humanity that is expressed, but it's not always approved to be shared with the outside world. So back to why this mission-driven work is so important, and I just want to thank Bill again for sharing some of those stories with us.